Kak ten mahammi, isukudi doom, Vivian, narrator, koled doom rovoy, tran o, doom Vivian, read, Sabine, Gideon, Loretta, Luiteo, Luinit, Sabine, Gideon, Loretta, Luiteo, not some cosmic sign, not intuition, just a headache and a half-finished cup of coffee that had gone cold on my desk by 10 in the morning. My manager told me to go home, rest, come back tomorrow. I almost said no. I almost fussed through it like I always do. I didn't. I pulled into my own driveway at 11:43 on a Tuesday. I remember the time because I checked my phone right before I turned off the engine, thinking I'd reply to one last email. The house looked the way it always did. My hydrangeas needed watering. The welcome mat my cousin gave us as a housewarming gift was slightly crooked. Everything was normal. Everything was exactly the way I'd left it at 8 that morning when I kissed my fiancé goodbye and told him I'd be home by 6. My best friend's car was parked at the curb. I didn't think anything of it at first. She had a key. She'd had a key for 4 years, since before she'd even met my fiancé. Since back when this was just my house and my life and my problem to manage. She used to come over on slow mornings and make coffee and leave little sticky notes on my mirror. She was my person, the kind of friend who shows up when you're sick, who sits with you in silence when words aren't enough, who stands beside you in the dressing room and tells you the truth about how a dress fits. I went in through the side door, the one off the kitchen, because the front lock had been sticking and I kept forgetting to text the landlord. The kitchen was clean. There was a mug on the counter, hers, the one with the chipped handle she always grabbed when she came over. A half-eaten sleeve of crackers next to it. Normal, completely normal. Then I heard it. Not voices, not right away, just water. Running water from the master bathroom upstairs, the kind of steady sound that means someone has been in there a while. I stood in the kitchen and I listened, and something in my chest did something I can only describe as a slow descent, like an elevator dropping one floor too many. My fiancé worked from home on Tuesdays. I set my bag on the counter quietly. I don't know why, quietly. I wasn't thinking yet, not really. I was still just a woman with a headache coming home early, standing in her own kitchen, listening to water run. I went upstairs. The bathroom door wasn't closed all the way. It was open just enough that the steam had curled out into the hallway, enough that the smell of her shampoo, jasmine, she'd used jasmine since college, drifted out and reached me before anything else did, and I just stood there in the hallway for a moment. For one long, terrible moment, while my brain caught up to what my body already knew. I pushed the door open. I won't describe everything I saw. I will tell you this. My fiancé and my best friend of 11 years were in my bathtub. Together. She saw me first. Her face did something complicated. Not quite guilt. Not quite fear. More like the look of someone who has been caught in a lie they were very confident they'd never have to account for. He turned around a second later, and the color left his face completely. No one said anything for what felt like a very long time. Then she said my name. I said don't. I walked to the bathroom cabinet. I found the small key we'd never used, the one that had come with the house and that we'd laughed about once, because who locks a bathroom from the outside? I walked out of the bathroom, closed the door, and locked it. She started yelling immediately. He followed a beat later, calmer at first, then less so. I stood in the hallway and listened to them for a moment. Her voice climbing, his dropping into that particular register he uses when he's trying to manage a situation, and I felt something inside me go completely still. I went into the bedroom. I picked up my phone. I scrolled to a name I hadn't had to call in a situation like this before, my best friend's husband. He picked up on the second ring. He sounded relaxed. He'd probably been at his desk, going through expense reports or something equally ordinary in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday that was about to end. I need you to come to my house, I said. Right now. He asked if everything was okay. No, I said. But you need to see it for yourself. I hung up before he could ask anything else. Behind the bathroom door, they were still talking at me. Through the door, alternating between explaining and demanding. I sat on the edge of the bed and I let the full weight of it settle over me, not dramatically, not the way you'd imagine in a movie, but quietly, the way a room gets cold when you leave a window open overnight. I thought about every Tuesday she'd texted to check in, every time she'd asked me offhandedly when I'd be home, every time I'd told her my schedule without a second thought because she was my person and I had no reason to keep anything from her. I thought about the last time the three of us had dinner together, 8 days ago. She'd reached across the table and squeezed my hand. My stomach turned. I heard his car pull up about 20 minutes later. I went downstairs and opened the door before he could knock. He was still in his work jacket, a coffee travel mug in one hand, and whatever he saw in my face made him stop completely on the front step. "What happened?" he said. It wasn't really a question. "They're upstairs," I told him. "Together. In my bathroom." I watched him process it. I watched the exact moment it landed. Not the words, but the meaning behind them. His jaw moved. He looked past me toward the staircase like he was trying to see through the ceiling. "How long?" he said. "I don't know yet," I told him. "Come inside." We went upstairs together. She heard his footsteps, and her voice changed immediately. Higher, more urgent, the specific pitch of someone who has just realized the geography of a situation has shifted against them. He stood in the hallway and listened to her voice through the door, and I watched his face close down the way a door closes, not slamming, just firmly, with finality. "You knew," he said. He wasn't asking me. He was realizing it out loud. She called his name through the door. He didn't answer her. I had my fiancé's phone. I'd taken it from the nightstand before coming downstairs. He always left it there when he showered, an old habit, and he trusted me enough to never set a passcode, which I had once thought was romantic and now understood was simply convenience. I opened it in the hallway while his voice filtered through the door, trying a different approach now. More controlled, more reasonable. The messages were not difficult to find. They were in a folder he'd labeled with her initials. 3 months of them, maybe more. I scrolled, and I read, and I handed the phone to her husband without saying anything because there was nothing to say that the screen wasn't already saying more clearly. He read for a long time. He didn't make a sound. Then he said, quietly, "She paid for the hotel." I looked at the message he was pointing to. He was right. She had initiated it. She had planned around my schedule, around my work meetings and my gym days and my standing Thursday lunch with my mother. She had noted the days my fiancé's car would be in the driveway and my car wouldn't. She had been precise about it in a way that took effort, that took time, that took a level of sustained intention that I could not reconcile with the woman who'd sat across from me at brunch and asked me if I was happy. And then I found the part that reoriented the entire story. It wasn't buried. He hadn't even tried very hard to hide it. A thread of messages with someone I didn't recognize, a name I'd never heard him mention, about my grandmother's trust. My grandmother had passed 8 months earlier. She'd left me a portion of her estate, the house where she'd raised 4 children, some savings, and a parcel of undeveloped land in upstate New York that had appreciated quietly for 30 years. My fiancé knew about it. I'd talked about it during the grief of losing her, when we were still in that raw period of just talking to get through the nights. I hadn't hidden it from him. Why would I? The messages were clinical in a way that felt worse than cruelty. After the wedding, account access. 6 months in, initiate transfer. If she questions it, cite joint asset management. Get her to sign before the honeymoon when she's still emotional. I sat down on the floor of the hallway. Her husband sat down next to me, his back against the wall, the phone still in his hand. For a moment neither of us said anything. The water sounds had stopped inside the bathroom. They were whispering now, their voices tight and quick, words I couldn't make out. "They planned this," he said. "Yes," I said, "not just the affair. The whole thing. Yes." He exhaled. He had 2 kids. A 7-year-old and a 5-year-old who called me auntie and ran to me at holiday dinners. I thought about them and felt a specific grief that had nothing to do with what I'd lost and everything to do with what they were about to lose, through no fault of their own. I looked at him and I could see him thinking about them too. That same grief moving across his face. "My kids," he said. "They're going to be okay," I told him. And I meant it, even though I had no idea yet how any of this would be okay. I started the voice memo app and placed the phone at the base of the bathroom door. Whatever they said next, they were going to say on record. She didn't disappoint. Stripped of the ability to manage my reaction, she went after him instead, and what came out in the next 20 minutes was an education. She'd pushed for today. She'd been the one to say my schedule was clear, the one who'd told him it was safe. She mentioned, without realizing what she was revealing, a conversation they'd had about timing, specifically about how long after the wedding they'd need to wait before he could access the trust without triggering legal review. Her husband stood up from the floor. His face was the face of someone who has just watched the last version of a story they believed fall completely apart. I stood up too. I opened my notebook. I'd gone into the bedroom to get it, the plain black one I use for making lists when I need to think. And I wrote 4 lines. Document everything. Contact my attorney, protect the trust. Don't explain myself to anyone who doesn't deserve an explanation. The pen didn't shake. That surprised me. I thought it would. My fiancé's voice came through the door again, softer this time, trying a different register. Reasonable, patient. The voice he used when he wanted me to doubt myself. He said we could talk about this. He said he could explain. He said things had gotten out of hand, and that didn't mean what I thought it meant. I leaned close to the door. I said, "I know about the trust." The silence on the other side was total. I stepped back. Her husband was watching me. I think in another life, in a version of this day that didn't exist, we would have been strangers. 2 people with no reason to be standing in a hallway together. Instead, we were the only 2 people in the world who understood exactly what had just happened. We called my attorney together. She'd been my grandmother's attorney first, a woman in her late 50s named Loretta, who had the specific energy of someone who has seen everything and found most of it unsurprising. She arrived within the hour with a leather portfolio and no wasted sympathy. She listened. She asked 3 questions. She looked at the phone. "That's fraud," she said, about the trust messages. "Attempted, depending on what they managed to execute before today. But fraud." She handled everything methodically. She walked me through freezing the shared account my fiancé and I had opened 6 months ago. The one I'd thought was a step toward a future, and he'd apparently thought was a staging ground. She drafted the language for an emergency protective order on my grandmother's estate. She made calls in a voice that brooked no argument and wrote things down in a handwriting so precise it looked printed. Her husband found the hotel receipts in my fiancé's coat pocket. We hadn't even gone looking. He'd hung his coat on the chair in the corner of the bedroom, and the pocket was open, and a folded paper was right there, as if even the evidence was tired of being hidden. 4 receipts, 4 different dates, all within the last 3 months, all at the same place, all charged to a card I'd never seen him use. Loretta photographed everything. At some point, they called 911 from inside the bathroom. I heard her voice, low and urgent, telling someone she was being detained against her will. I looked at Loretta. Loretta looked at me. "She's not being harmed," Loretta said. "She's being inconvenienced by the consequences of her own choices." The officer who arrived was a woman, younger than I expected, with a steady professional manner and the look of someone who had learned early on not to make assumptions about domestic situations until she had full information. She came inside. She confirmed they were unharmed. She listened to what Loretta told her. She listened to what I told her. She went to the bathroom door and asked her, directly, whether anyone had threatened her physically. "No," she said. But the officer said, "Were you threatened physically at any point?" A long pause. "No." The officer came back to where I was standing. She said she'd need them to leave the premises when this was resolved. She said it with the practiced neutrality of someone who has watched this version of a story before and knows how it goes. When the door opened, the steam had long since dissipated. She came out in a towel, mascara destroyed. looking at me with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. It wasn't remorse. It was calculation, still trying to read the room, still trying to figure out what version of events might work. My fiancé came out behind her and immediately addressed the officer. He was good in situations like this, calm under pressure, articulate, the kind of man who can make a story sound reasonable while it's happening. He tried that now. The officer let him speak. Then she asked him to confirm that yes, he had been in the bathroom voluntarily, and no one had physically forced him to stay, and yes, he understood he needed to vacate the premises. He looked at me when he realized it wasn't working. The performance dropped out of his face. What was left underneath was smaller, less impressive. The face of someone who gambled badly. "You did this," he said to me. "No," I said. "You did. I just stopped pretending I didn't see it." She reached for my arm when she walked past me toward the stairs. An old reflex, maybe. Or one last attempt. I stepped back. She let her hand drop. Her husband was standing at the bottom of the stairs. He'd been there for a while, perfectly still, watching her come down toward him. She stopped 3 steps from the bottom. She said his name. He didn't answer her. He just looked at her with the steady, broken gaze of someone who has already finished grieving something, who has moved past the stage where words help. "Go get your things," he said. "My kid's pickup is at 3. I'll be handling it alone from now on." She opened her mouth. He turned and walked out the front door. After they were gone, the officer waited until she saw their cars leave. The house was quiet in a way that felt almost aggressive. Loretta sat at my kitchen table finishing her notes. I stood at the window with a glass of water and watched the street, which looked exactly as it always had, hydrangeas and all. My phone had 22 unread messages, not from her. She'd apparently already understood that avenue was closed, from mutual friends, from her sister, from my mother who had somehow already heard something was happening. I put the phone face down. Loretta looked up. "You did the right thing," she said. "Every step." I thought about that. I thought about the version of me from this morning, the one with the headache, the one who almost stayed at work and pushed through it. "I didn't do anything," I told her. "I just came home." She smiled slightly. That was enough. The next 3 weeks were not clean. They never are. She texted from numbers I didn't recognize. The messages were different each time. Apologetic, then explanatory, then accusatory, then apologetic again. A cycle I recognized from years of knowing her. The specific rhythm of how she processed being held accountable, which she had very little practice with. I read the first one. I deleted the rest unread. Her husband filed for divorce 11 days later. He called me the night before to tell me not to ask permission, just to let me know. We talked for a long time, mostly not about any of this. He talked about his kids and what he was going to tell them and how much he didn't know yet. I didn't have answers. I just listened. Sometimes that's all you can do. My fiancé contested the protective order on the estate through a lawyer of his own who wrote letters in aggressive language that Loretta described as optimistic. The contestation failed. The hotel receipts and the message thread about the trust made his position, in Loretta's words, untenable. He did not attempt to contact me directly after the first week. My mother came over the Saturday after everything happened. She sat at my kitchen table, and she held both of my hands and she said, I should have liked her less. I always thought there was something. I told her I didn't want to talk about what anyone should have seen. She nodded. She made us pasta instead. We watched something forgettable on TV and she slept in the guest room, and in the morning she fixed the loose hinge on my side gate that I'd been putting off for 2 months. Small things. That's mostly what healing was. The hinge. A new set of towels because the old ones had memories attached. Repainting my bedroom a color that had nothing to do with anyone else's preferences. Sleeping through the night for the first time in weeks and waking up and lying there in the morning, quiet and realizing, with something that took a moment to identify as relief, that the headache was gone. Her husband and I got coffee about 6 weeks after everything. We sat at a place equidistant between our neighborhoods, a small spot with bad lighting and good espresso, and we talked about his kids and my trust, and the specific strangeness of having been brought together by the worst version of two people we had loved. He was doing better, he said. His kids were adjusting. He'd taken them to his parents' place for a weekend, and it had helped. I asked how he was. Really, he thought about it. Clearer, he said finally. Everything is clearer now. I understood that exactly. There's something I've come to believe. In the months since that Tuesday, betrayal doesn't break you at the moment you discover it. That moment is almost too large to feel. What breaks you, if you let it, is the slow processing of all the small moments you didn't see. The text she sent while sitting across from you at lunch. The glance she gave him over your shoulder at your own engagement party. The schedule she kept in her head, like a map of everything you trusted her with. What I've learned to do instead is notice what else those moments hold. The engagement party where she smiled across the table at him, I was there too. Laughing, eating cake, genuinely happy. That was real. She didn't have the power to erase that, no matter what she chose to do with the rest of it. The trust I gave her freely was not stupidity. It was generosity. The difference matters. I'm not someone who believes everything happens for a reason. I think that framing asks too much of people who've been genuinely wronged. But I do believe that some discoveries, as brutal as they are, give you something you didn't know you needed. A clear view of the floor beneath the rug. A chance to rebuild without anything rotten underneath. My grandmother's house is mine now, free and clear, protected in a way it wasn't before. I drove up to see it last month for the first time since she passed. It's a simple place, white clapboard, a long porch, old maple trees in the yard. I watched through every room and I thought about her, about what she'd spent her life building, about what it means to be given something from someone who loved you. I stood on the porch for a long time. The trees were just starting to turn. It felt, for the first time in a while, like something that belonged to me. I've thought a lot about what I would have done if I hadn't come home that day, if the headache hadn't been bad enough, if I'd taken an ibuprofen and pushed through to 6 o'clock like I normally would have. I think about that version of me coming home to an empty house, my fiancé back at his desk, my best friend's mug washed and put away. No evidence of anything except maybe a faint trace of jasmine in the upstairs hallway that I would have walked right past. I think I would have married him. That's the part that sits with me, not the anger. The anger was clean and useful and eventually it passed. What stays is the understanding of how close I came to building a life on top of something that was already rotten and never knowing it. How many years I might have handed over. How much of my grandmother's trust, and my own, would have been quietly redirected before I noticed. There's a version of justice I used to believe in that required the wrongdoers to understand what they did, to feel the full weight of it, to come to some reckoning that you could witness. I don't believe in that anymore. What I've come to understand is that cause and effect doesn't need an audience to function. My fiancé planned carefully and thoroughly and it still collapsed, not because I'm smarter than him, but because sustained deception requires a level of control over circumstances that no one actually has. He couldn't control a headache. He couldn't control which Tuesday I decided to go home. The architecture of what he built was always going to depend on things outside his reach, and the longer you depend on that, the more points of failure you create. She made the same mistake. She kept a meticulous mental map of my schedule, my habits, my trust, and then she forgot that the one variable she couldn't track was chance. 11 years of friendship, and in the end she couldn't predict a Tuesday. What I've had to work harder to understand is my own part in it, not in the sense of blame. I didn't do anything wrong, and I've stopped entertaining the story where my openness or my trust was a character flaw. But there is something worth sitting with in the question of why I found it so easy to assume everyone around me was operating in good faith. It wasn't naivete exactly. It was a choice I made to extend that good faith, and it cost me. The lesson I've taken is not to stop extending it. It's to stay more awake while I do. to notice when something feels wrong and let myself name it instead of filing it away. Her husband showed me something in those hours we spent together in my hallway that I think about often. He had every reason to fall apart and he didn't, not because he wasn't devastated. He was, I could see it, but because he understood immediately what mattered more than his devastation. His kids, the reality of Tuesday afternoon pickup, the next thing that needed doing. That kind of clarity under pressure is not something you either have or you don't. It's something you choose repeatedly in the middle of a situation that is actively trying to take it from you. I watched him make that choice and I tried to make it too. I think that's the closest thing I have to a takeaway from all of this. Not a lesson, exactly. More like a reorientation. The people who tried to diminish me were counting on me staying small. They mapped out a future where I was passive and trusting and 2 steps behind, and they were thorough about it. What they hadn't accounted for was that I could choose, in the space of one afternoon, to stop being that person. Not because I became someone different, because I finally became more fully myself. The house in upstate New York still stands. The maples are probably past peak color by now. I'm going back up in the spring.